I've criticized certain media and certain aspects of fan-based communities that romanticize or fetishize taboo subjects such as abuse, rape, pedophilia, incest, and even certain weird tropes such as cheating with the other woman, or age gaps with barely legal teenagers and senior citizens. All the topics that are heavily criticized both within dark romance media aimed at women and problematic ships within the back sticky corners of fandoms are actually kinks too. They just all have different names. Consensual non-consensual is basically a fantasy version of non-consensual scenarios like, but with full consent, safe words, and boundaries in place. Sadomasochism is basically consensual pain or power dynamics, but again, all in a controlled setting. Role play can include things like pretend where two adults act out a taboo family dynamic without actually being related. Age play is when adults roleplay as different ages, which could be a way to explore age gap fantasies safely. Safety and consent are extremely important to people who are proudly into BDSM and kinks. I don't think there's anything wrong with being into certain stuff in the privacy of your own home, and you prioritize everyone else's needs and boundaries in a safe and healthy way. I know a lot of other creators already talked about kink talk specifically because it's understandably weird. Like, I saw this video that was titled, "Kink talk is way too sexual." This gay bar has way too many queers in it. I'm gonna be honest, I wholeheartedly think that even when so many creators talk about the immoral bits of kink talk, even if they don't actively shame the people who do the immoral bits of kink talk, that won't matter. I've noticed that there's a subset of people who are drawn to non-vanilla activities specifically because they enjoy the absence of consent. Vanilla means normal, by the way. They don't just get off on power dynamics, they get off at the violation of them. For example, I brought up this comment before when I was talking about men, and as an optimist, I'm glad that my voice or face did something for you, but also as a normal human being with boundaries, keep that to yourself. I can't control what you do with my videos or my image privately, but you chose to make me aware of it, and that's where I think the real kink is. It's not just attraction to me, it's getting off knowing that you've made me and others uncomfortable. I don't know why, but this has happened to me multiple times, even without the internet, with people that I used to call my friends. A couple years ago, before I met my current partner, I was on call with someone. At some point, he went quiet and I just assumed that he had fallen asleep. Some people like to fall asleep while listening to someone talk, which I get because I do that too. I find it comforting to hear a voice I like while drifting off. So I kept talking, thinking that he was just dozing off. Then all of a sudden, I hear this little weird noise. I had a suspicious feeling about what just happened, but I really wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. So I asked, "Whoa, are you okay?" And he just straight up said, "Yeah, I'm good. I just to your voice." Wow, that's weird. So I tried confronting him myself. I said respectfully that he made me uncomfortable and I requested that he never does it again. He responds, "Yes, mommy, whatever you say." I complained to our friends about it. He got off at being shamed by them in my defense. And some friend groups would totally be into that. Some people would be so down for that kind of behavior. And of course, it's not a bad thing that he finds certain voices attractive or that he has mommy issues, but my friends and I didn't consent to be a part of it. But that didn't matter because he knows what he did was wrong, and he got off at me being upset with him. And now I can never win because I would get upset by just looking at him. So now he gets what he wants by just appearing in front of me. It's a win-win for him and a lose-lose for everyone else. What's even cooler is that this situation happens to a lot of people. If you were on the internet, more specifically Reddit a couple years ago, first of all, hot loser. Second, you might remember this very specific Reddit post from Am I the Asshole? In this post, there was a wife who described her husband's humiliation kink, which involved peeing himself in public settings, including family gatherings. He would announce the accident out loud and request a change of clothes from his wife that she'd bring along. To keep his kink a secret, they told family members he had a medical condition causing him to pee himself on accident, so he could keep peeing himself without consequence. The Am I the Asshole situation was actually not that, but it was actually the woman's sister had a wedding that was coming up, and she told OP and her husband that the husband would be uninvited to the wedding if he was going to cause a disruption at the wedding. They tried to tell the sister, no, we won't cause a disruption, he'll just change in the bathroom. But the sister was firm in saying that he had to either wear an adult diaper or he wouldn't be allowed to go to the wedding. So, in support of her husband's kink, instead of making him wear a diaper for a couple hours, she told the sister that she would also be skipping the wedding. The sister got upset and the family got upset that the woman wasn't coming to the wedding, so is she the asshole? Whatever you just answered, it doesn't matter because this isn't real. I know, shocking that a Redditor would fabricate a story for attention. There was an update to the post saying that it was actually the husband who was posting on Reddit posing as his wife. He admitted making up the entire thing so he could be shamed by strangers online to fulfill his humiliation fetish, and the people involved didn't get to choose whether or not they wanted to be a part of it. I noticed that this kind of behavior has become so normalized or played off as jokes online. I just think it creates such a dangerous environment for people who just want to be on the internet without being objectified or manipulated. Every time I see someone with an appealing figure, the comment sections will always disappoint me because it's just people treating them like NPCs in their own personal fanfics. Yeah, Rule 34, whatever, but I've always thought that involving real people that didn't consent to that shouldn't have been a line that was crossed. I don't know, maybe I'm too woke for that. Sometimes when people do go public with their private interests, any response other than support can be labeled as kink shaming. I think it's wrong to heavily criticize or shame consensual kinks as a whole, since the kink communities have such big involvements in certain subcultures like the alternative community, or more monumentally the LGBTQ+ community. Like the Stonewall Uprising. The Stonewall Inn catered to queers and drag queens, but they also had members of leather and kink subcultures where they also helped in resisting the police raid. Kink shaming and homophobia can sometimes get mixed together in that regard, since trans people were once considered cross-dressers, which was classified under a kink, even if they weren't doing it out of arousal. A lot of people don't know about that history behind Pride, where it was just people who were being told their existence was too inappropriate, so there was a lot of people who draw this really weird line about which queers should be allowed at Pride or not. Like, especially with the rise of conservatism right now, there are so many gays who argue about certain kinks at Pride. But I don't know, man, maybe I'm just desensitized to it because I had to squeeze through straight people making out in front of my locker and seeing other students having sex in the bathrooms during break. But people crawling on the floor with a collar on with rainbow leather attire seems incredibly tame to me. Of course it's weird to some and provocative to others, but like, Pride has always had protests of queer people using the kink community to push back shame and purity culture. I don't think Pride was ever meant to be squeaky clean or comfortable. It was a riot. It was sex positive. It was radical. Of course they're gonna be a part of Pride. And while I think conversations about safety and boundaries are important, trying to sanitize or purify Pride to make it palatable for outsiders kind of defeats the whole point. That's just my opinion, of course, because it's also extremely funny watching conservatives fearmonger about kink at Pride, and then they bring up photos from the Folsom Street Fair, a literal kink festival, and they claim that it was at a Pride event. Folsom has been held annually in San Francisco since the 1980s, and it's marketed as an adult event, explicitly 18+. People go there knowing it's about BDSM, fetish gear, and sexual expression. It's not tricking anyone or pretending to be anything other than that, so the people who conflate it with Pride are doing it on purpose. There are booths run by sex educators, community health organizations, queer-owned businesses, and nonprofits. There are fences, ID checks, and it's treated as an open but contained environment. Events like Folsom is also why I know it's fully possible to practice the weirdest taboo kinks safely, ethically, and with full consent. You don't need to force your kink into public spaces or manipulate people into doing things that they wouldn't do otherwise. If you're into something that requires a group, a setting, or some infraction, cool, those resources exist. There are online communities, adult events, and safe spaces built specifically for that kind of interaction. I have come across the weirdest taboo gooner content and communities online, which, whatever, I'm on their turf. If I'm uncomfortable, I'll leave and complain about it somewhere else. But I just get so annoyed when I see that type of content portrayed in the worst way possible on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, official company profiles, public TV shows, and story titles that have no trigger warnings. When that happens on public platforms, I think people have every right to be uncomfortable and speak up about it. However, I don't think they should get death threats or doxxed over it, and I've said that before, twice, so stop DMing me bragging that you harass pro shippers when I specifically said not to do that. You can complain with me and share my woes, but don't send death threats to people because that just adds to the problem. I know sometimes topics with taboo fiction and BDSM overlap sometimes. My issues with taboo fiction with what I believe to be objectively immoral plot lines or dynamics is how insensitive people can be with it. I believe that it's completely possible to indulge in any weird fiction in an ethical way. For example, you apply your morality with the scenarios or the characters in whatever media. There were some people who thought I hated Hunter x Hunter because of Hisoka's and Palm's uncomfortable interactions with Gon, but Hunter x Hunter is one of my favorite animes. I just dislike those specific characters and how their interactions were portrayed. I think the show is fantastic. A little confusing, but fantastic. I don't think every person who is a fan of Hunter x Hunter endorses those dynamics just because they like the show or manga. manga, because a lot of fans of the show criticize that aspect of the show as well and know that those bits were wrong or at least weird. Another example is that you keep the fictional prompt and real life issues separate. Like, there are a lot of people of all ages who fantasize about being sold off to their favorite celebrity in the fanfics they read, but I know most of them know that trafficking and kidnapping are a terrible reality to live through. Everyone knows that my mom tried to sell me to BTS is a very silly Wattpad prompt, but when a K-pop star gets into a bunch of shit with non-consensual acts with another woman, their fans run to the victim's defense, and that's great to see. The thing that pisses me off is that there are just so many people who don't do that. There are a lot of men who fantasize about being put into a situation where a beautiful woman forces herself onto him. Cool CNC king, but it becomes immoral for those men to trivialize or mock male essay done by women just because they have a fantasy. Someone made a game where the only objective is to violently women. The game is fictional, obviously, but it becomes immoral for people to defend or normalize when the game devs receive for what I believe to be valid backlash for the concept. Even with my personal disdain against pro shippers, who are mostly people who believe that ships shouldn't be regulated because that promotes a lot of toxic tensions between fans, my gripes could still be argued with, but it's just fiction. But pro shippers also ship real people, and I think it's wrong to say it's fine since the ship part is not real, because the people are real. At the very, very least, I think that it should be okay to say, hey, this ship is bad because real people didn't consent to this. I saw one specific comment dismissing everything I said when I was talking about pro shippers. I'm really glad that not believing anything I say is the worst that this community does, because I feel like aunties would try to find my workplace and get me fired instead of not believing what I do for work. Some of the things they brought up were valid, like being surrounded by aunties that support doxing, bullying, and harassment also harms your sense of morality. But in the middle of their rant, they say, what even is overindulgence? No offense, but maybe overindulgence is that you're this offended that people say negative things about the things you like. My main critiques were of the taboo parts of pro ship, which can make people excuse those taboo scenarios in real life if they consume the content too much. You need to be self-aware that there are weird and bad people within your community. I feel like this is obvious, but I love anime. There's so much criticism towards anime fans where certain anime mix anime fans sexualize Japanese teenage girls and fetishize Asian women altogether. And those critiques are valid because I know there's a lot of anime fans who are like that. I'm not offended because I don't fetishize Asian minors. I like reading yaoi and BLs. There's a lot of criticism around women and femmes who read yaoi are raging homophobes, or when they read yaoi, they begin to sexualize and trivialize gay relationships. And that critique is valid because I know there's a lot of people who are like that. I'm not offended because I'm not homophobic and I don't fetishize queers. I understand that it gets so tricky navigating the morals around sexual stuff because there are so many what-if situations that it'd be impossible to cover them all, especially if certain scenarios get hypothetical children involved and the whole topic becomes even more intense. Everyone wants to protect children. Everyone has their limit to what they find inappropriate or not. It's extremely hard to see or accept other people's tolerance when their bar is at a different height than yours. Like, some people's bar is just fetish content. Like those weird videos with terrible acting and weird concepts, those are fetish content. I feel like people keep mixing up kinks and fetishes, but they're not really the same thing. The way I understand it is that kinks are more like verbs. They're like how you do something. Fetishes are more like nouns. They're the thing itself being a turn-on. Like, all kinks could technically be considered fetishes, but not all fetishes are just kinks. Like the video that I brought up at the beginning covered fetish content and reacted to chiropractor fetish content, and he was trying to be open-minded by saying that he didn't want to invalidate the process of chiropractic because it's a medical thing. But it's actually not. Chiropractors are not actually doctors. Like, they are legally not allowed to call themselves that because chiropractic care doesn't have any long-term legitimate evidence behind it. Fetish content in general just seems to try to hide itself behind as learning videos. Like, this video is purely for educational purposes. She just happens to moan and have some jiggle physics sometimes. I keep seeing it with the let's cook the worst cake you've ever seen to look at this life hack that you'll never need. It just bothers me that this type of content just lies about its purpose. I don't care about actual fetishes that you have to look up on your private tab like vor or farting, but it just makes me feel like these videos are weaponizing plausible deniability. I'm sure you can figure out what that means based on the context I'm using it in. As I said, it's perfectly fine engaging in kinks and fetishes even online if everyone you're engaging with is a consenting adult. But when you present these videos as something else like a medical demonstration or a tutorial or something, it removes the opportunity for true consent from the viewer. everywhere. I know that it's so hard to even comment on sexual content or just people who trick others into engaging with their sexual desires, because even if you're really nice about it or you offer a compromise, there will always be people who will never take these sorts of criticisms seriously, since they will always assume it's a part of conservative purity culture. There are so many people who are completely against kinks, fetishes, or BDSM entirely, but even within a Christian, traditional, pure culture, they still have kinks. Breeding kinks, dom, sub kinks, even though straight people keep using terms top and bottom, free use kinks, but they live in denial by saying it's not a kink, it's just the natural biological purpose of humans. Ah yes, so biologically natural that you have to tell others to do it. The thickest, girthiest lines that separate BDSM from abuse is consent, communication, and trust. Most people who partake in kinks have even more conversations about boundaries and sometimes have even better respect for their partner over vanilla couples, just because they understand that pushing those limits have to be done in a certain way, which is why safe words are such a staple for BDSM. But safe words are just a part of CNC. The vanilla safe word is stop. There are so many kinks, fetishes, and just general weird shit you could be into that can be practiced and fulfilled consensually, ethically, and safely within a controlled environment. You don't have to get the public involved. You don't have to get random internet crushes involved. You don't have to get the internet involved. You can, but it all should be consensual and making sure that everyone involved is also happy to be in the situation you've put them in. But I don't know, that's just me. Laters.